Organizations were both saying something and not saying something. So when we talk about Western philosophy as a whole, we are actually only focusing on one aspect, of pertinence for the claim we're making, because it's impossible to encompass something like Western philosophy as a whole. And we've paid for these mistakes in seeing how, now that we live in a global environment, the rest of the world reads such statements from Hegel or modern European philosophers about, what did you say, Levinas said, Asia is dancing, or Hegel says the East does not know freedom, and they're absolutely absurd claims. But they do focus on, each one has some kernel of truth or falsehood. They're just expressed in a way that is exaggerated and off-putting now. But Levinas has a distinction that runs through all of his thought, the saying and the said. It's one of the key distinctions. And in a certain way, we're almost tired of it, as those of us who have studied Levinas, who know Levinas. We don't want to beat this thing to death. Nevertheless, I want to talk about this, but I want to begin talking about the difference between philosophy in the positive sense and philosophy in the negative sense. Because like Nietzsche, like great philosophers who are not technicians, words have meaning in the context, and most words refer to things that have two sides to them, a positive and a negative side. So all through Levinas we hear this criticism of philosophy, and yet what he's doing is philosophy, and has the rights of philosophy, the authority of philosophy. Well, what does that mean? We know only a handful of great philosophers have this ability to rewrite the history of philosophy. The rest of us are living within the history of philosophy. We are historians of philosophy, and a handful of people are philosophers. And part of what goes with being a philosopher is you can see the history of philosophy through the lens of your own philosophy. That could be more or less suffocating, as in a Hegel, or more or less liberating. And I think in Levinas's case, it's more liberating. But I'm prejudiced, as you all know, and most of you are too, in this regard. So there's so many different ways that Levinas phrases this, but I went to Otherwise Than Being, and found in a sentence, to the intelligent, on page 167, to intelligibility as an impersonal logic is opposed intelligibility as proximity. Now, Levinas will also fight over the word signification. So here the fight is over the word intelligibility, right? So this is about 2/3 down on page 167. To intelligibility as an impersonal logic is opposed intelligibility as proximity. So he doesn't want to say, oh, proximity, we're dealing now with the irrational, or we're dealing with faith, or we're dealing with any number of things that philosophy has excluded, less than philosophy, non-philosophy. Levinas wants to say proximity, everything that he's trying to teach, is the intelligibility, and therefore also the source of the intelligibility of other domains of intelligibility, of derivative domains of intelligibility. So that structure remains, although now it's a structure of saying and said, as opposed to the different origins, principles, essences, ideas that have posed themselves in the history of philosophy that we know, brainwashed by Hegel, as the history of philosophy. So here, intelligibility is the word at stake. Signification is very often the word at stake, right? This does not wish to be dismissed. And really my topic this morning, because I don't want to kick a dead horse, I want to talk about more the said than the saying. Because the saying is what we've spent our time on, what we're devoted to, but I want to talk about the ruses of the said. The issue of keeping the saying alive is always what's at stake. Hegel thought it was the dialectic. I was just looking briefly at Kitaro Nishida, a Japanese philosopher, who attempted to think of the saying, although he didn't know Levinas, he died in 1945, as a dynamic that operates in the tension of affirmation and negation without resolution. Everyone since Kant is reaching to say what it is that is the life, as it were, and even this word is at stake. For Levinas, it's the proximity, the saying of meaning, what gives meaning. I personally think that the solution lies in Levinas's great insight that only ethics can keep alive transcendence. Nothing else has the capacity to keep alive transcendence. Because even with Nishida, so long as it is not rooted in saying, then this dynamic tension between the affirmation and the negation becomes a said, and gets lost in the said. But we'll come back, because I want to talk about the ruses of the said today. So from my last book, I just Xeroxed the page so I wouldn't have to write it on the board. So some of you may know this, because I'm sure you all have this book, but indulge me that I want to talk about truth, because philosophy certainly has to do with truth. If we say intelligibility, we're talking about something that can be spoken and communicated, and that is not simply private. There is no private language, ultimately. It's only grunting. So to communicate is to be philosophical, because we are engaged in this enterprise of seeking truth. So I go from the most primitive theory of truth, which is the correspondence theory of truth. And you see here on the left page, it's the sign or the symbol that refers to the signified or the thing itself, right? That is, I'm leaving open different options of philosophy. If you think that the sign symbol refers to the thing itself, you're a realist, right? If you're thinking it refers to the signified, that is a phenomenal manifestation of the thing itself, you're some form of idealist, transcendentalist. But this is how the correspondence theory works. I'm thinking primarily here of empirical science. This is how empirical science works, but this is a very commonsensical notion of truth. I say the word cat, it's that furry creature walking by. That's what I mean by cat, that furry creature. Ultimately, it has to refer to that furry creature. Then Husserl, I'm jumping right to Husserl, introduced the notion of intentionality. You could have gone to Kant, but we're doing contemporary philosophy. So we now have the consciousness, that is, we recognize that all this is occurring somehow as a function of consciousness. That is, the sign referring to the thing, the correspondence, the sign referring to the thing is occurring within consciousness. So a signifier, consciousness, then you see that bigger arrow, and now I've bracketed that whole thing we had before. Right, so all this is now bracketed. So this would be the move that Husserl makes from the naive attitude of the natural sciences to transcendental science. Simply, I think this. So when Kant, by the way, the word I couldn't think of yesterday in Kant was paralogism. The paralogisms, yeah, the paralogisms are why Kant explains exactly why he cannot say anything about the I think. This is where Husserl breaks with Kant, because Husserl will describe the I that thinks. Right? This is one of the great advances. And that's where he turns to internal time. The I that thinks is characterized by internal time. So it seems as though we've reached the high point, phenomenology, truth, aware that it's a truth. It's taken the Copernican turn, right? This is post-Copernican term. And then we get Levinas. And Levinas then contextualizes this entire complex that we have from Husserl as vocative. Right? It's interpolated in that sense of, from Latin grammar, vocative, or accusative. This is all to someone. That is, as Victor was showing yesterday in one of these vast statements about European thought, from Levinas's point of view, Western thought is a monologue. It's a false dialogue. It's a dialogue attempting to become a monologue. So it's either a monologue or it's trying to become a monologue. Right? We know these huge generalities. So Levinas' great insight is the only thing that keeps the thing rolling, that keeps this thing going, is this obligation to respond to the other. This shows up in empirical science in terms of verification theory. This is the Levinasian moment of the correspondence theory of truth. Nothing is true in science until it's verified. Right? It has to be intersubjectively confirmed, repeated. What do I want to talk about then? I want to talk about how we prevent ourselves from agreeing with Levinas. That is, how does the said coagulate? I mean, putting aside what I earlier called difficult, because these difficulties are also used to prevent entry into Levinas's thought. So that some people will say, phenomenology, that's not a science. End of story. They're done. They don't have to read Levinas. Or they'll say, ethics, philosophy doesn't have to do with ethics. Right? Ethics is for ordinary people. Right? So the things we call difficulties are also, at a psychological level, obstacles. They're blockades, they're barricades. I think one of the most popular barricades I see in academia at this psychological level is to say, oh, this is Jewish thinking. Jewish thinking. Oh, do this in the Jewish studies department. Right? So, this may be true for Jews. Or, even if this is true, we are doing whatever other thinking. But it's not universal thinking. And I began by saying there is nothing in the, remember I said there's no cabal, there's no, when you go to his so-called confessional writing, there is no secret teaching, there's nothing else. It is, everything is on the table. His Talmudic readings are philosophical texts. And his philosophical texts are Talmudic readings. Now that means he's taking a position within Judaism. There are other people who would disagree with him. There are people within Judaism who are saying, oh no, there is such a thing as Jewish thinking. You are unfaithful to the Jewish thinking. And Levinas says, no, the true Jewish thinking is this universal thinking. So there's an argument within Jewish thinking about Levinas, right? People who want to avoid his thinking precisely because it's universal, right? Every religion has these debates. It always happens that way. In terms of the saying and the said, I want to think about the said. We know what keeps alive the said. It's what we spoke about yesterday, the face, right? The obligating face. That keeps alive, and my responsibility. That keeps the said from coagulating into the ceremony that it always becomes, inevitably. And at the social level, the level of the third, for Levinas, since I committed myself to him being a political theorist, he is saying democracy is not just one regime amongst others. Politics is democracy. Now, that means if you have an anti-democratic state, it would be at the level of the third, parallel to, at the moral level, the refusal of the other. Right? Because it denies the dignity of individual citizens. So the notion of citizenship for Levinas is the ground for the possibility of a political saying. Now we can't map these two exactly on top of each other. That's one thing is also a mistake. I was saying it's a mistake to think of political as the economic, but it's also a mistake to think of the political as the personal. So that the political is its own dimension. The dimension of the third, the dimension of justice, is the dimension of the equal, of the equality. The dimension of the personal is inequality. It's asymmetry. It's an infinite obligation, and it's in that tension that we strive for justice. Now this we've said. We can debate, we can argue, but this is what this is what I'm proposing, and I hope you heard me say yesterday. It also took me a long time to realize, finally, that he is a political philosopher in this sense. I also did not think of Levinas as a political philosopher. Now I can't believe I didn't see it before. It's all over it once you see it. But you worked that out for yourself. So, so let's go to these different levels and see how the said coagulates. Let's look specifically at how the said coagulates. And I'm thinking at the level of correspondence, Levinas actually, I wish Paul were here, because he says in his interview with Richard Kearney, which is in this early collection on it, you know, I'm no longer happy with the word face-to-face. After this seminar, I no longer like the notion of face-to-face.
Because I don't have a face.
Because I don't have a face. Right, right, I don't have a face. I really, so face-to-face is already a political statement. Because it's from the outside, from the third. Yeah. He says, in answer to a question, Richard, by the way, I think the interview with Richard Kearney, of all the interviews Levinas had, and now they've been put together and published, and this is the best one. Because Kearney is a philosopher, right? Or is more humbly a historian of philosophy, but a very, very good one. And he's also, in large measure, a Levinasian, if you know Richard Kearney's work. Levinas says, he says that Heidegger summed this up admirably when he declared that science calculates but does not think. That's a very famous line of Heidegger, that science calculates but does not think. Levinas says that captures why the correspondence theory of truth, as science understands it, is not, it escapes the saying. It wants to say, I don't have to talk to you because I said the cat is brown and there's the brown cat. I'm talking to God when I say that, right? That is, I'm thinking, how do we exclude the other? We exclude the other because there's the cat, it's brown, and all I'm saying is the cat is brown. That's the truth. It stands all by itself. It's not part of anything else. And we build up a system of those interrelated statements, and we have the network that we consider science. This is the common sense idea of science, the set of true propositions, and then we would add that they are coherent. So let's look at coherence, right? The set of true propositions that are coherent, because these are related. People, a coherence theory of truth, namely that the system does not contradict itself. Paul, I just quoted Levinas agreeing with Heidegger.
You did on purpose.
I said, I wish Paul were here. Okay. Coherence without correspondence, we know, cannot be distinguished from madness in a psychological sense. That is, there are many systems that are coherent but mad because it just has to be consistent with itself. It just has to be non-contradictory. And you can come up with almost any proposition and then derive a number of other propositions and be out of touch with reality without the correspondence. That is, you only have certain points of correspondence. A great case would be Judge Schreiber's memoirs. If you know this book, it's fabulous. This was a German judge, late 19th century, who went mad and was in an asylum for a long time and lived in a complete crazy fantasy world, somehow became healthy, and then wrote a memoir about the world that he believed in. Actually, probably still believed it, even when he was out. And it is not so, and yet if you were inside of it, it would hang together. Freud writes a book about the Judge Schreiber. It's very interesting. But it's so coherence avoids the saying by internal consistency, right? If it doesn't contradict itself, I'm okay. I don't have to do anything else. That's my only concern, non-contradiction. So it's purely formal. So you could have a closed system or an open system. You could add to the system so long as it's coherent and non-contradictory, or not. Now, a more recent variation of this that is far more tempting in our day is what I've referred to sometimes as a differential system of science, because this is where Derrida goes, and this is where Deleuze goes, a differential series of science. It would be the recognition that in this model that I've put down about sign and, oh, I lost my own, there it is. The sign that refers to the thing, it's the recognition that the sign itself is part of a language, right? So that the word cat has no meaning it gains its meaning not because it refers to this furry animal, but because we know how it's used within that differential system of signs. So that if I said, when I say the cat is brown, the cat can mean something, but if I said cat the brown is, it doesn't mean cat the brown is. You go, what? So the differential theory of sign, which is popular with Derrida and Deleuze, is to say it's its place within a language, and then they go on to say that a language is not simply a synchronic system of signs, it's a diachronic system of signs, insofar as it's developing, and even in its syncratic element, it's a drifting off into temporal zones that are not present. So the notion of bringing present a sign in the face of the corresponding thing itself is impossible. This was Derrida's critique of Husserl. There could be no fulfilling intuition of a meaning, because the meaning itself was never fully present. So there's no meaning that can be present to the thing itself. And the thing itself is what it is only as a function, furthermore, which is then absorbed into the differential system of signs. There is no cat. There is only a cat insofar as the signifier cat makes sense in a differential system of signs. And this makes a certain sense. I mean, intuitively it doesn't, because we say there's the cat, right? The kicking of the tire, the famous move in American philosophy. When you want to make a fool of someone else, you kick the tire of the car and say, there it is, the tire. So you say, there is the cat. It makes a certain sense, but we know from cultural diversity that some cultures point out some things, they see some things, and other cultures see other things. They literally don't have the same world. It's a function of the language. And by the way, that's where science steps in to say, no, we can carve out of those culturally different worlds the one world that is available to science, and that's why science shifted into quantities, because it didn't know how to deal with qualitative aspects. It's like Husserl steps in and says, we can deal with the qualitative aspects through phenomenological science. We can deal with evidence rather than objects, but the first powerful move of modern science was to reduce the world to quantity so we could have a universal world, in spite of these cultural, linguistic differences. So you see in Spinoza, he says the word is worth nothing. He never spends any time with the word. The word prevents you from getting to the truth. He's interested in the idea. The adequate idea has no word. Only the inadequate idea has a word. Right? It's a fantastic system. So the mind, so you say, what language is God speaking? You know, of course the French think he's speaking French. He's not speaking any particular language, because he has the pure idea without words. But again, this is what we left behind in shifting to contemporary philosophy. The differential theory of signs says to Levinas, what do you, and this is why I disagreed with Raymond, and he knows I do, in terms of including Derrida as a member of that opposition of transcendent versus immanence. For me, Derrida is one of the masters of immanence as a disciple of Heidegger. He just shifts in a way almost parallel to the shift we see from Freud to Lacan. He shifts from Heidegger from being in a kind of physis sense to being as a logos. Of course, Heidegger himself made that shift. That's why it's not exactly like Freud and Lacan. Freud being having a mechanistic pump system of the mind, and Lacan saying, no, it's a language. Brilliant maneuver. That's what Lacan has contributed. So we say, I think Derrida has done the same thing, but Heidegger had already done it. So he's just continuing with the play of the differential system of science in both its synchrony and its diachrony. So there's no need for the saying. So Derrida will convert the saying into the said. There's nothing special about the saying. The whole task of Derrida is to show that every univocal meaning becomes an equivocal meaning. The question we would then pose against Derrida is, was the saying ever a univocal meaning? Was that the meaning of the saying? Univocity? No, it's actually never said. The saying is never said. And it's not simply a deferral. It's never said. It's not like, oh, one day we'll capture the saying and we'll be done. There, we're done. We got it. There it is. His name is 42. Right? There are no magical words. There's no finality. The saying and the unsaying and the re-saying and continues. This is the project we're part of. This is who we are. This is what it is to be human. So to make it equivocal can muddy the waters. I would say that in a certain way, Derrida was the technician that deliberately turned the saying into the said. This is why he had this confrontation, in his own mind, confrontation with Levi-Strauss, and this is why Levi-Strauss did not take him honestly, all that seriously. That is, he had already dealt with these issues in totality and infinity before Derrida came along. I know that they're bringing people to this gigantic conversation, and I'm committed in print to having said that there are two types of Levi-Strauss scholars: those that came to Levi-Strauss through Derrida, and those that came to Levi-Strauss through Levi-Strauss. And those who come to Levi-Strauss through Derrida, it's very hard for them to shake off this differential reading, and they want to somehow appropriate this trace, because Derrida appropriated the trace. The trace would be then the absence of the other signs that make the present sign significant. And those who came to Derrida through Levi-Strauss, by the way, when I was in Paris studying Levi-Strauss, I was also taking Derrida's class, so I was there with both of them. But my heart was never with Derrida. And I didn't go there to study with Derrida. And in fact, yes. So this is a very clever. This is a really attractive diversion of the said, folding upon itself for intellectuals. And it has captivated comparative literature departments, captivated English departments. It has really had no inroads, real serious inroads in philosophy departments. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, even in continental departments, it's very rare that there are deep inroads by the Derridian approach in a philosophy department. People question that. Now, to go back to Heidegger before Derrida, the diversion then goes into being as a historical unfolding, so that the so-called saying is then projected onto this third party that is treated as a third party, and we then do obeisance, because the true saying, the Levi-Straussian saying, would then be misinterpreted as subjectivism, right? Rather than as multiple ruptures. The saying is multiple ruptures, right? It's a world of ruptures. It's a world of monads with mouths, right? It's not just windows and doors, but mouths and eyes, and this peculiar thing we were speaking about yesterday, the face, as the breaking through of the coagulation of signification. Now, the place that Levi-Strauss deals with some of these issues is in that section on skepticism and philosophy at the end of Otherwise Than Being, where Levi-Strauss defends skepticism in the way last night we were talking about how, in some sense, you could say he defends Nietzsche only as that human being, the breakthrough of the human being. So Levi-Strauss, who is always saying he's going to abuse formal logic and go outside of formal logic, understands perfectly well that the skeptic's argument is always refuted. The skeptic who says there is no truth, right, contradicts himself in the very saying of what he's saying. This is a perfect instance for Levi-Strauss, which is why he says skepticism and what does he call this section in the end of the talk?
167.
167.
Last paragraph.
Oh, yeah. The periodic version of skepticism and
line 4 from the bottom.
Yes. But there's a whole section of 165. Yeah, the whole section is called Skepticism and Reason. That's right. And the bottom of the page, the periodic return of skepticism and its refutation. This is a good image for Levi-Strauss because he's not defending, of course, the skeptic's claim that there is no truth. Right? He's not saying, oh no, the philosophers got it wrong, because he's not going on to the level of formal logic. The skeptic is wrong formally. Levi-Strauss is wrong formally. He cannot defend himself formally. Right? The saying does not appear within the logos of the set. Right? And it only has a trace, right? And he has to be sensitive to the trace of it. And the trace will be effaced. There are no guaranteed traces. Right? Oh, I suppose I shouldn't say that. The trace can never be effaced, right? It's just that it's more or less lively, like a metaphor. We speak of metaphors being dead, metaphors being alive. The trace is more alive in some languages, some vocabularies, some approaches. Linguist pulls all those strings, you know, for them. And yet, in some areas, it's less alive. But it has to somehow be there because it all is a function of ethics. It is all a function of a saying. That is the source. So the greatness of skepticism is no matter how many times it's refuted, it never goes away. And for those of us who have taught introductory logic, it's infuriating. So for people who are forced to teach introductory logic, reading Levinas is a real palliative. Okay, fine. I'm glad my students have this resistance. They're human, right? Nonetheless, they're wrong, and you can show them that they're wrong. But they're right in another sense, at another level, and it's that burst of the other level, namely the human resistance to the domination of formal logic. That's the correct position. Some of us together have had the conversation of denouncing analytic philosophy, and it's one of the things most frustrating dealing with analytic philosophers. They live and breathe within the set. Right? And we try to do everything we can do to break through, and it's as if we're dealing with machines.
That is to say, they just breathe, they don't live.
They don't live, right. And for Levinas, they hardly breathe because of the inspiration, respiration thing in Levinas. So actually, I put back this chart from, I forget what it was, the second day, because here would be 3 registers where the saying is lost, so the immemorial is lost to retention, the unrepresentable to memory, and the invisible to history. But we would have to go back to repeat the lecture, the talk I gave yesterday on the face, because in each register, the whole point of the idea of the face is to see how in the body the trauma is the thing that can't be integrated, or as Kearney said, very in a statement that the trauma can be not cured, but it can be healed. So I'm not sure I know what that means. I never distinguish curing and healing. But there is some, I think what he means is that the other comes to us hungry. We're talking at the level of the body here. You bring them food. You're never done. It's not enough. They need shelter. They need nice clothes. They need this. They need forever. It's always insufficient. So you can cure it, but you can never heal it. Right? And you can never actually. Levinas says your responsibilities increase to the measure that you fulfill them. Why is that? Do you understand this? Why your responsibilities increase to the measure you fulfill them? Because the measure you fulfill your responsibilities, to that measure you realize how irresponsible you are. And only when you start becoming responsible do you realize how incredibly irresponsible one has been, and how much more needs to be done, and how it will never be done. It will never be finished. Anyway, I'm changing subject. I shouldn't. I'm not just thinking tomorrow. I just wanted to say that's pretty much what I wanted to say today. I wanted to talk, and let's open the discussion to how the said closes itself from the saying.
Yeah, my question actually, I kind of sympathize with the reader with the criticism of to philosopherize is due to, I mean, to do philosophy is due to philosopherize in certain degree. Because, for example, we are talking about the hunger of other and feed other people food. There was an example, the woman was here, she was asking for coffee, I don't know why, but we are doing philosophy here. We are talking about Levinas. We didn't talk about the woman. We didn't talk about whether she was hungry or whether she was, although we asked a little, you asked her, but we didn't talk as Levinasians together. I mean, I'm not saying we should do whatever, just say it's different. If you do philosophy, you still do philosophy. It's not to that degree. You really do what you say in some sense. And can I just add one?
No, go on.
For me, the real Levinas is Schweitzer, who was a philosopher or musician. He went to Africa, being a doctor, and helping the people there. He just gave it up. He gave up philosophy and he goes to Africa and he helped them. And the other one, Confucius.
Are you thinking Albert Schweitzer?
Yeah.
Albert Schweitzer went there because he thought they were incapable of being doctors themselves.
Who?
Albert Schweitzer, who did wonderful work. I respect what he did, but he was also pretty racist.
What?
Well,
What do you mean by?
it's not good example.
Right, not a good example.
Skip that.
But anyway, go on.
And Confucius, because he was trying to leave his philosophy. He never read a book. I mean, we call him a philosopher. He doesn't have a theory. And this wisdom for me, if you want to, every time, because the reduction from saying to said, it should be every moment. So if it's every moment, that means the wisdom can't be a norm. You don't have this norm in your mind that you know how to treat the others from before. So like for Confucius, whenever there's a context, he will respond just for that specific thing, use the wisdom for that moment. Like if it's this student, he will tell him something, and he will tell the other student different things. There's no norm. There is a said because he is still telling them, but it's at the same time a saying because the wisdom is for that moment. There's no norm. So I don't know. For me, I am very confused. Like if I want to be a real Levinas, shall I just sit here and talk with you? I go out to do something else. That's my question.
It's such a good question. But here's one way to answer it, which I hope is not a rationalization. There are many places and levels where the work of ethics occurs. There is no one place. Now, we all hold images such as Mother Teresa as very high images of self-sacrifice, giving oneself to and for others. And we should never lose sight of the different registers and the different ways in which one can be sacrificing.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Teresa is much better.
much better. But on the other hand, human life has many different layers, many different levels. In a way, Levinas brought ethics into the lion's den. That is, he brought ethics into philosophy. Now, that was the ethical work. The ethical work was that there were a lot of people teaching philosophy who were teaching the secondary quality, the secondary character of ethics. There were people serious, and they still are, seriously teaching that ethics is for fools and contemplation is for we few brilliant people. Now, Kant was already in that lion's den, fighting that fight. Now, in contemporary philosophy, Levinas is in that lion's den. Now, do I think that my life is more worthwhile because I'm trying to teach Levinas in a university rather than help feed people who are in Africa? I don't think I would say that, but I don't really want to make judgments so much. But so I think the fact that you feel that is a very good thing. But and I don't want to be rationalizing, and maybe I, to some extent, am, given the priorities of the needs in the world today. I think we have to, as professors at universities, privileged, or graduate students, not to lose sight of what you are saying, not to say, oh, these people, these pitiable people who are not doing philosophy or wasting their time helping people. No, we should admire, respect, give them credit. I'm 100% with you. But someone will have to do this work in the university too. And
in this seminar.
What?
In this seminar.
And in the seminar too. So if not you, if not me, who? Right? That's how. Does someone have a better answer? Does everyone feel the force of this question?
I can. Well, kind of follow up the discussion. Actually, Mao is trying to give two Chinese approach to Levinas. One is Taoism, one is Confucian. If you're the Taoism guy, you act what you believe. You don't say it. You just do it. So what is one way of approaching Levinas is doing Levinas. Rather than read Levinas, discuss Levinas, write Levinas, talk about Levinas. Just do it. And that's one way, but you got to know Levinas first. Like I said yesterday, you got to increase your willingness to show them, and that's benefit of reading Levinas to me, increasing moral responsibility. And the other way is Confucianism. This is something we talked about yesterday. This is something we think is not well developed in Levinasian politics, in what you say, political philosophy. And Confucianist approach will be actively involved into politics. Yeah. And pulling down all the Levinasian moral concept into the power system. Yeah. And actively engage into the power system instead of, well, teaching in university is the way of engaging in the power system.
How about,
to be honest.
Had Levinas not written this, had people not taught it, then Pavel, who was the president of the Czech Republic, would not have been. That is, he read Levinas. And he wrote a beautiful book called The Power of the Powerlessness, of the Powerless. And he lived it. He installed this as part of the Czech Republic. So the repercussions of intellectual life, people have different abilities.
Shoulders.
Different shoulders. Yeah, and, but I'm not denying the force of what you're saying. We should feel that. We should never lose respect for the different registers or think that we're working in a ivory tower vacuum. That's exactly what we're trying to break open. Not through interdisciplinary, right? But through the seriousness, the worth of what we're doing. Nietzsche said that knowledge could not explain why knowledge. He said, why knowledge? And he couldn't answer that himself, so he chose fun, right? Levinas is the first philosopher, to my mind, that can say, why knowledge? He justifies philosophy. Philosophy is worthwhile because it contributes to the justice of the world. Because without philosophy, there's knowledge, we could not have a just world. So providing an ethical justification for our intellectual labor is invaluable. Yeah.
I think this kind of questions, of course, very important. What is my vocation? What I should do, and how should I balance? But I think this tension is always here. I mean, we can never escape whatever we do. If we do the way Mother Teresa is doing, I think, I mean, if somebody's read her diary, I mean, she was also questioning. I mean, she was also uncertain what she's doing, whether she's doing well. I mean, so I think it's never asking, never ending question. Of course, I think what we should do, and philosophy probably helps us, and Levinas also to try to find a balance. Because of course, if we just close in our own, just speaking to each other, to myself, for instance, probably it's not the way we should do that.
One day we see the mother mouse in somewhere. African country. It's the mouse we love.
I would love it. You know, I know people who love it. Like Berlusconi is working in the black community.
We should be proud of.
Kearney is working. He's part of these groups in Ireland, Catholics and Protestants, children dialoguing, and Palestinian, Arab-Israeli, Israel dialogue. He's actively involved in that. Now, if he wasn't, I would still respect him, but I respect him more for being actively involved in that.
Yeah, I have many Lebanese friends in London. They are trying to engage with conflicts between Israel and Palestine. They think that's like what they should do as a Lebanese. But they want to help. They think they know both in some sense. Because in London there's a lot of study of Arabic culture, and if you are Lebanese and you study the other part, so they want to help. That's so right. I respect that.
It's basically Kearney's program is to listening to the other. Just listen to the other. And then he's not judging, but first hear out the otherness of the other. You're an Israeli, hear what the Palestinians are saying. You're a Palestinian, hear what the Israelis say. And the same with the Protestants and the Catholics. Just hear what they're saying. And it turns out, it seems, that this is beneficial. This really is beneficial. People are living within the mythology of the other. It's not an other, it's a fake other. It's the other of their own. What was the, remember, what was the third area that Kearney was, he had 3 areas of conflict in this world that people were talking to. I don't remember the Irish one and the Israeli one.
Japanese and Chinese.
But it should be.
All Taiwanese with Chinese. We talk. Well, there are too many to count.
I agree with everything you said, absolutely. There's no certainty in
There's
any
no
of
easy.
this. There's no certainty in any of this. The vocation, what are we waiting for the skies to open and say, yeah, you should teach at the University of Buffalo? I don't know, that wouldn't make any difference to me, actually. Remember Socrates said, one of the great things that Socrates said, a tree was telling him something, and his response was, is it true? Right? Is it true? Is it false? Right? It's great. No oracles anywhere.
One idea you haven't talked about today
The
is
set
the
regulates.
patience. You were trying to, you want to talk saying and patience. In actually
Did I say I was going to talk about patience?
yeah,
Yesterday? Did I say that?
no, it's written.
Oh, and the thing, I didn't even look at that. I'm sorry.
Come on.
No, I didn't. What did it say?
So see?
Saying patience, diachrony. Oh, I think I said what I wanted to say about patience yesterday. I think this is where the word holiness comes in. This is the level of the political. This is the long haul, the long distance. It's not the eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. It's that it's the planting of the tree for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and setting up institutions that will last way beyond your own life. It's dying for is living for beyond your own death. Living for beyond your own death, which might mean, unfortunately, dying here and now for somebody, but it always means living for that messianic, or that future that is more future than any future that I can envision. That is, the most future is the future of justice, which I cannot conceive, except in principle. So to support policies that will be, isn't this one of the complaints we have about the confusion? I have this complaint about the confusion of capitalism and politics, because capitalism is a short-term project of making money. That is, you make money now, and the world can destroy itself tomorrow. Whereas politics, as I understand it, the care for the commonwealth, the distribution of power to care for the commonwealth, is a very long-term project, which is why it seems only government is concerned with the environment, because environmental questions are working on a scale that is far beyond any scale that the capitalist economy is working on. And that's why things like highways, we want them to be built in such a way that it will last a long time. Bridges, we don't want to be rebuilding bridges every year. You put up a bridge, it should last a few hundred years, if not 1,000 years. These are government projects, these are political projects, because their future is more future than the future of capitalism. Capitalism can't handle that. It just makes money now, and it stops making money, it shuts down. But certain things have to be done. They have to be done in the long term. Schools are not short-term projects. Let's just graduate this class, take their tuition, and we'll shut down. They're long-term projects. I know this because I was brought to Buffalo in part to create a program in Jewish studies. And I have people like donors, and they want everything to happen like this. It's like, everything has to happen like this, immediately. I said, we're talking about a program that will last, this is a university. This will last hundreds of years. We have to set this thing up right. It's going to take time. And I'm beginning to convince them but most people's concern is, here now, my life, I want to see something done. Yeah, we all do, but things take time. So the most important projects in life take a long time. They outlast us, right? And so the notion of patience, I think, is one must have that patience. And it's exactly opposed to the hedonism of eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. And that's responsibility. Boy, that is talk about the shoulder, that's a big responsibility. Because you're not going to reap the benefit. Right? This is not about your benefit. Right? The whole Levi Nelson thing is not about your benefit. Right? That's why we will debate sometime about happiness. Happiness is added on, is tacked on. That's a bonus. It's nice. It's nice to get it. Also, remember the original I said, don't worry about happiness. You're going to get a lot of it. Most of us are spending most of our lives for it. We're only doing a little bit in the Levi Nelson direction. Right? Mother Teresa's are rare, right? But we should admire them. And every person she helped, she was leaving 100 people unhelped. Right? She was torn apart by that too. Yeah. She was probably thinking, I wish I could teach at the university. But again, the danger in defending what we're doing is that it is a rationalization for doing nothing. I absolutely appreciate that. And we shouldn't lose track of that danger. That's one of our dangers. Yeah.
But if it's a teaching, it's not really doing philosophy, it's a teaching. So it's always vertical, like you tell me, like, oh, saying like help. And I think that maybe in a small scale, it's still working because I'm receiving the teaching. It's not only like, oh, this is the word, and this is the concept. It's true.
And this is the problem with the commodification of the university. Because now the SED is taking over. People are being judged by how many articles they write, how many conferences they go to. That has nothing to do with what we do. It never did have anything to do with the university. This is a completely new phenomenon. People didn't even have to have PhDs in universities in the past. In fact, in England, it was looked down upon. PhD? What are you, insecure? You need a PhD.
Jobless people everywhere.
Right.
You should be grateful.
Oh no, it was you don't need to show anything. The teaching is the face-to-face, the contact.
Now they have virtual classes.
Having spent some time in Italy, where they examine the students orally. In America, it's always by written exam. I switched over to that oral method, and it really takes the students by surprise. You get the in the graduate seminar, you have to spend a half an hour with me, and you're going to have to tell me what you're saying in your paper. And they go nuts. They just want to hand in this paper, right? I say, no. I'll read the paper beforehand, and I know you wrote it. I read it. Now you're going to tell me it. You're going to tell me the paper, right? Yeah. It's a nice experience. It seems so crazy. I think it's a nice experience.
Thanks for that.
I think everywhere, everyone's feeling this new pressure of quantification. It's the Weberian rationalization of our world. But you're right, it's teaching. If teaching is not what it's about, then what are we doing?
Can I share one idea to support your Levinatian
You can always do that.
Politics?
You can always do that.
Philosophy. Actually, I did one paper on one section talking about political philosophy in Levinas' book.
Yes.
And I did try to develop three politics in Levinatian's ethics. One is politics of the same, is what we are talking about. And one politics of third party, because third party is everyday life. It's not like episodes other. So the third one is politics of messianism.
Of what?
Messianism. That's why Messiah, messianism.
Oh, I see.
That's why actually you talk about patience, because it's politics of hope and patience. And I want to share the politics of messianism in terms of Karl Marx, Derrida, and Levinas. I compare the three, and because they are all Jew anyway. To begin with.
You never says this, but Marx has brought up a Christian. Derrida knew nothing about Judaism.
Well, let me explain that kind of something. I would say there's something in common in terms of messianic idea. To me, there's impatient of messianism. Messiah is coming in Karl Marx. That's why the revolution.
Impatient.
And while in Levinas, you have absolute patience. Because you can wait absolutely for the other. And Derrida is somehow in between. On the one hand, you want to to do something now in here, to improve the situation, political situation now. On the one hand, you still got to wait Messiah to come, who will never come.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it. So it's in that patience. So that's why I talked to Jen in terms of doing ethics. Actually, I admire Karl Marx more than Levinas.
Karl Marx.
Yeah.
Because
he said philosophy had interpreted the world so too long. Now it's time to change it.
But it's not ethics, it's more revolution. Revolution is killing people.
No, that is Mao Zedong or Stalin.
He said you need to use violence to break the thing, the
chains.
No, that's what Derrida called the economy of violence. Light against light, violence against violence. But you got to have a better good behind your violence. Otherwise, violence is just increase more violence. So violence becomes sort of necessary in some cases. So in that sense, there's a politics we can kind of develop in Levinathian's perspective, but through Derrida to Karl Marx.
That's really beautiful schema.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And the reason I argue is because deep down they have methylenic blood in their body. So that's why Karl Marx wanted revolution. Yeah, come on. You talk about Chinese every time to me. Okay, that's one of my papers. We did try to combine three great thinkers together. One's doing ethics, one's, well, give us moral, the big picture of ethics.
Marx will refuse you. He won't.
No, there is a, I think there's an ethical motivation, definitely, what Marx's message is. But it's a critique of Kant in the sense that we're going to have the revolution so that ethics might be.
Yeah.
But on the way.
We don't use ethics.
Yeah,
that's my question.
Yeah, but on the way. And this is the difference between Sartre and Camus and, the 30 Hands and the Juste Assassin. Sartre has given up the idea that we can be ethical on the way to the revolution because we have to have the revolution so that ethics might be. And this is what's great about Levinas is that you take ethics over history, and history is judged at each moment by ethics.
Unfortunately, this is what the Marxists poisoned as revisionism. But this is Bernstein. Absolutely. This is actually Kerensky, who believed that you had to maintain ethical means to ethical ends. And Marx, as you say, the ends justify the means.
Yeah, you look at...
that's the mean ends
It's
issue.
very Hegelian here. So Hegel once wrote, Die Weltgeschichte ist die Weltgerichte. This is the history of the world is the tribunal of the world. Everything is justified because it happened, by the fact that it happened. So if we have violence, this is just the negative moment in the dialectic, which is going to bring about more positivity.
That's Marx.
This is it. Of course. Marx is just
I know.
is just taking Hegel one step further in this direction of politics, if you want.
That's right.
I think that's the reason why Levinas is supposed to evoke democracy, while Karl Marx is supposed to revolution. Is one, you improve the situation from outside. I mean, revolution, you turn down all the absolute negation. And while Levinas, he doesn't want to have such big violence. So he wants to improve from inside. You got to patience. Messiah is coming. Like your mom's coming to see you tomorrow. What do? You got to prepare to clean up all your house, to go shopping more, to buy the food, to prepare to cook. That's something you got to do. We call politics. Improve the situation now and here. But you got to wait. Your mom is coming. She's the absolute other. You got to do something today. That's something like Levinas and Karl Marx. You put them together, and I think that's what Derrida trying to do. Give him some credit. Come on. He only encountered Derrida in early Derrida, who criticized Levinas. But that Derrida is quite Levinasian. Come show some credit to him.
No, there were two Derridas. There's the Derrida who was Derrida, and the one who pretended to be Levinas. Why not go to the real Levinas?
Well, we all pretend to be Levinas, including you.
But I admit
if we read.
I'm not pretending.
Well, when Levinas died, he got his talk to Levinas. Don't forget, he's the only one invited in his funeral.
Yeah, but I was there when he transformed. I know.
You were there?
Yeah, it was at the American Philosophical Association. He gave a talk on friendship and Aristotle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when Derrida became Levinas.
1988.
Well,
1988. I heard this. I
when
heard
he
the
did
talk.
the party, the spectrum of Marx, he already Levinas.
I know, but he never.
Political science,
he
the
never
trace
pulled-
of the face,
he
is
never pulled
internal
it off.
ghost.
And why did I need that simulacrum when I could go to Levinas?
Because in political science, Levinas, we need the political parts of Levinas, which
That's
someone
what I-
got to develop it.
But I have already found this political mentor.
But we say it's not enough. Someone got to do more.
No, I actually see Derrida as a distraction. You and I don't see eye to eye about it.
No,
Because
no.
I
We are on
don't
the
see-
same
I don't
page.
see that he ever repudiated the Derrida of deferral, of indetermination, and of difference. And I think
That
that's.
was early Derrida.
I know, but I
You still
never
talk
saw
about
the
early Derrida.
I never saw the repudiation. I never
Give him
saw.
some possibility of redemption.
I saw him try. I saw him try to save himself, but
Anyway.
I was not convinced. Right. His witnessing was not convincing.
Okay. Okay, that's one thing I think we can do to talk about the
No, I
political
love that.
aspect of Levinas and ethical philosophy.
That's a beautiful
Yeah.
scheme. I think this, everyone knows this in political thought, the difference between means and ends, and for Levinas they are consistent, and for Marx, who was impatient, as you say, and then justifies it with this, the historical victors decide that everything, it's a kind of theodicy, right? Everything that happens is good. It's a religious notion. I don't see any reason why we should think that. Just because something happens, it's good. Or that someone is successful. I tell my analytic colleagues that even though they control American philosophy today, everywhere, Harvard, Princeton, everywhere, I say 100 years from now, everything you're doing will be forgotten. They don't actually have an answer for that. I don't, because I'm not a prophet either. I don't know all that. But I truly believe that. 100 years from now, everything they're doing will be forgotten. No one will be reading these little picky articles about nothing, right? They'll be reading Derrida and Levinas and Deleuze and I went through Derrida dance for your sake. Right. So the patience, and that's what I began this whole seminar with, the distinction between maturity and immaturity. That's maturity. And this notion seems to have been forgotten in philosophy, with the excitement of contemporary philosophy, this reworking of all of philosophy, figures. People read Nietzsche, and they forgot Bergson. Now there's sort of a Bergson revival. But Nietzsche's exciting, he's playful, he's fun, as if the alternative to all this dualism was simply the body. That's what Deleuze represents. If you reject the mind-body dualism, let's remember, was always in favor of the mind. Now we've got the revenge of the body. Well, we're going to have to suffer through this epoch, the revenge of the body. But the truth of the matter is going to lie in this new combination. It's not even a combination. This new integrity coming out of the unity of mind and body that we see so explicitly dealt with in Merleau-Ponty and philosophies like Levinas, but more in Merleau-Ponty. So, why don't we take a break, and then we'll get back. And it really, this morning, I want you to feel free. These are large topics. You know,